on the Adventures in Brain Injury podcasts. Today we have another fabulous episode for you and some fabulous news. It's the month of May, and other than my birthday, it's a special time for you. What's up?
Well, it was 6 years ago on May 8th, 2011 that I suffered my severe traumatic brain injury. So this is my anniversary, and for my anniversary month, I want to give everybody an opportunity to work with me. So I have opened the doors to free 30-minute consultation with me because I know that not everybody can afford my services, and I want to give back to this community. I also want to know everyone at a deeper, more personal level.
That's a really generous offer, Kevin, and I really like that you're building a personal connection with your community members, because we get to speak to them through the podcast, but we don't always get to speak with them individually. So thank you very much for such a kind gift.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And this is also a great opportunity for practitioners to reach out to me. I would absolutely love to connect with practitioners who are part of this community and to strategize how we can further improve neurorehabilitation. So you can schedule your free consult at adventuresinbraininjury.com/consultations.
Wonderful. Very generous. Thanks again. Kevin, the new cover for your book, How to Feed a Brain, Nutrition for Optimal Brain Function and Repair, is up online at feedabrain.com/book. Looks great.
Oh, thank you. My favorite part about it is forward by Dr. Datis Karazian.
We happen to reference his work a lot on the podcast.
We do indeed.
And I'm really pleased that there is a recommendation from Dr. Bonnie Kaplan, who is Professor Emeritus from the Cummings School of Medicine in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So I'm pleased that you've got a Canadian on the front cover too.
I think we've been talking about her a bit.
We have been, yes. And it's great that so many people are aware of this work across North America. And you just had a fabulous review given to you, another recommendation.
Yeah, Dr. Venu Julapali is a gastroenterologist out of Houston. He is an MD and very, very amazing person. His mother suffered a traumatic brain injury, in her case, a ruptured brain aneurysm. And we've been working together and using the protocols of the Feed a Brain book towards her recovery.
Oh, phenomenal.
Yeah. We actually met through Andrea Nakayama's practitioner training.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's so good to have an MD coming into the nutritional and the functional nutrition aspect of things. And it was really enlightening for him, and it gave him a really well-rounded view of nutrition and functional nutrition and how we can utilize diet and lifestyle to promote health and heal digestion and heal the brain and the body.
Well, Andrea is really doing some fantastic work at making functional nutrition approachable from the layperson and reaching out into the functional medicine community. I think it's a brilliant bridge, and she's worked so hard for so many years. It's really starting to show.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been working with her for some of those years.
Terrific.
We're working to revolutionize neurorehabilitation. She's working to revolutionize medicine in general, and I have so much respect for her.
Well, and through nutrition, the common denominator there is nutrition, and now you've got a fabulous gastroenterologist right in the fold there with you. The two of you, yeah.
So you can learn more about Andrea and her practitioner training at feedabrain.com /HNL for Holistic Nutrition Lab.
So you've got a recommendation from one of the top gastroenterologists in America, and you've got the support of two fabulous clinics. Our first supporter, the Minnesota Functional Neurology and Chiropractic, is still on board with us, helping to promote our work. And a new sponsor has joined us today, Revive Treatment Centers of America at revivecenters.com. How fabulous.
And it's humbling to receive this support. And Revive Treatment Centers, we actually have Dr. Joshua Flowers from Revive on the podcast today.
Yes, yeah. So, and, we've got supporters supporting your work with Feed a Brain, with Adventures in Brain Injury sponsors, and our listeners can also become a part of this movement to bring critical neuro information to the rest of the world. And support can be given through Patreon, patreon.com/AIBI. $1, $2, a toonie, a loony. That's all it takes.
That's it. And it really helps us keep things moving. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes. That would be super helpful. But, enough of the housekeeping. Why don't we get into this?
Let's go. I'm so excited for this interview.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 22nd episode of the Adventures in Brain Injury podcast. My name is Kevin Ballister. I'm a severe traumatic brain injury survivor, creator of AdventuresInBrainInjury.com and creator of FeedABrain.com. And with me is my magnificent co-host, Michelle Malmberg. How are you, Michelle?
Oh, fabulous. Yet again. Thank you, Kevin.
Every time. Nothing ever changes with you.
You don't see the dark, sleepless nights. Podcast days are always happy and sunny.
Well, hopefully we'll talk about some of those sleepless nights and what we can do about those.
Yes, please.
Who do we have with us today?
Oh, fabulous gentlemen. All of these functional neurology experts are just beautiful souls. And so we have today Dr. Joshua Flowers. And you met Dr. Joshua Flowers through the Revive Treatment Centers of America in Colorado.
Yes. And, as I said, they are now a sponsor of us. And I am a huge fan of Revive Treatment Centers. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, I'm so thrilled that we've got practitioners coming together, treatment centers coming together, and this podcast is just creating this wealth of information. I can't wait to see the ripple effects over the next year, 2 years, as more information becomes disseminated and more people find that there is help available. I'm so pleased and so excited. So I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Flowers, please. The basics. The man is very well educated in this field of expertise and has focused his studies toward functional neurology for the last 7 years, since 2010. He received his Bachelor of Science in Human Biology in 2011 from Logan University, and he continued his studies at Logan and finished his degree in chiropractic in 2013. Then, continuing on that line of education, he received his Diplomate certification in Chiropractic Neurology through the American Chiropractic Neurology Board, and he just can't get enough, so he continues his studies in clinical neuroscience and emergency medicine. And Kevin, I think you need to take this doctor with you when you go moto biking. Emergency medicine. Kevin, take this man.
Yeah, hey, and plus, I'm pretty sure that Dr. Flowers can ride.
Am I right?
So, welcome, Dr. Flowers. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I definitely appreciate it, and it's always great to get awareness out there, and have people knowing as much about what they can do for themselves and how they can get in the right place as fast as possible.
Yes, yes. Well, and it's so frustrating following an injury, and then it's even more frustrating figuring out how to manage one's life. Usually, so many severe changes occur rapidly, immediately, and then trying to find care can take years and years. So I'm hoping that this information, when it gets out there, people aren't waiting. It's easy. They know who to call.
That was one of the biggest things for me was I was blessed enough. I after my brain injury, I was that's one of the
back
things,
up.
Yeah, back up. Just rewind.
Yeah, tell me about your brain injury.
Well, my brain injury, I was actually on a bicycle. I was out cycling. Never been much of a cyclist, but my wife convinced me that maybe I should try it out. So I was out cycling, and I was going down the side of the road in the bike path, and got struck by a car.
Oh no!
And it was the first time I'd ever rode my bike without a helmet. Just so happened that it would be the first time I got hit by a car. So my helmet was actually in my vehicle, and I was riding to my truck to get my helmet. And a car struck me, and I woke up in the emergency room, and I spent a few days in the ICU. I had multiple brain bleeds, multiple skull fractures, and was not in a very good place. But what really, really bothered me the most was what I consider to be the lack of care. The lack of continuum of care after they got me stable and make sure that I didn't die. And, studying emergency medicine and things now, I have more respect and I have more understanding. Their job is to keep us alive, and they do a very good job at that. My job, or, what we do now is we focus a little more on the back end of things and really taking our time with taking care of these issues and helping overcome some of these issues. But, whenever you're in the hospital and you're released, it's a lot of times here's some painkillers, and, this will wear off after a few days and you should start feeling better. And, that's not always the case, especially for that mild to moderate brain injuries.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
So it's like we go into emergency medicine, we go into emergency care, and they are phenomenal at saving our lives, getting us breathing again, talking again, doing things and existing in the world. And then we're discharged, and it's like, well, now what? There's still a lot further to go. And this is where you have dedicated your practice.
Yes. And I think that was one of the biggest eye openers for me. And one of the biggest pivotal moments in my life was, there wasn't any direction. It was, good luck, and, hopefully you'll get better. And then, that's very tough for somebody who's suffered a brain injury. You already have issues with confusion. You already have issues with trying to sort out things, processing input and stuff like that. It takes a lot longer for somebody who's suffering from a brain injury, and it's really hard to navigate that on your own.
Amen.
And again, lucky for me, I was already in the field. So being in the field, I was in the ICU calling friends saying, hey, you need to get me in and start treating me. And, getting that ball rolling as fast as possible.
Dr. Flowers, what year was this brain injury, please?
This was in 2012. So it's been right at 5 years.
Okay.
It'll be 5 years this August.
Yeah, and by the way, when this episode airs, it will be the 6-year anniversary of my injury. So happy anniversary, y'all!
I mean, that's so great. I mean, it's so good that, you can be here and you can celebrate that, and you can look at the triumphs and what you've overcame. It's just amazing. And that's something that me and Kevin were chatting about previously a little bit about, the anniversary, of the injuries and stuff like that. One of the big things for me was on the anniversary, the first year anniversary of my injury was the first time I rode a bike again. And I actually got out and was on the road, which made me feel a little uncomfortable, but
this time with a helmet.
Yeah, this time with a helmet. I'm white knuckling it, and definitely very stressful. But
sure,
it's overcoming that, and overcoming your obstacles is just so important.
Yeah, that feeling is just so liberating when you do something that you couldn't do the day before. That's massive. Yes. And I do kind of want to brush on like what an anniversary means to someone. Sometimes it's a really difficult day. Sometimes it's bittersweet. And the way I have looked at my anniversary is more of a transition in my life, like an important event, regardless of whether it's good or bad. In fact, I wrote at one point, like, my brain injury, some people have said, like, there's a reason you had a brain injury, and meaning like the universe has predestined you to have an injury and this and that. And I don't really know the answer to that, but what I say is that I'm going to give it a reason, which is exactly what I've been doing for the past, 5-6 years since it happened. I've been working towards that end of giving it meaning. And so the anniversary to me means it's an anniversary of an important day in the history of Kevin Ballister, in my history, regardless of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's a thing, and I acknowledge it, and I move forward with it, and I make the most out of it, So
I like that.
Yeah, that's very purposeful, and I think really the three of us can each claim to have done the same thing. Dr. Flowers was already in the neurological way. But your continuing study of emergency medicine really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really interesting things was I was almost strictly pediatrics before my head injury, and then after my head injury, I was very determined to have solutions and different things for traumatic brain injuries, and really helped shift my focus and kind of broaden my horizon.
Oh, for certain.
Yeah.
And aren't we grateful for that? Thank you.
So when you say you were already immersed in brain injury rehabilitation, what were you immersed in? What do you mean by that?
I was already I was very deep into functional neurology, and I focused a lot primarily on developmental delays. I was a child that suffered from a lot of dyslexic issues, and I couldn't read very well at all. And as I started studying neurology, I had different friends that kind of helped me along and helped treat me in different stuff. So it helped me overcome my dyslexia. So I was already within the community of functional neurology and very passionate about it. But I was very passionate more about treating children with autism and ADHD and dyslexia and different things along the developmental lines.
Okay.
And then whenever I had a brain injury, I was like, oh, well, I need to talk to some of my friends who are treating brain injuries. And then it was one of those things where you start learning from all your colleagues and all the people, and you start putting more and more together. And then all of a sudden, you're obsessed with it. And because it very much becomes a part of you, especially whenever you've been there personally. So that's why I was very passionate, and it helped me take the right steps very quickly. Some of those things like fasting early on and sleeping a lot, and really letting the brain heal was just it was very, very beneficial.
So when you're talking about fasting, you're talking about the metabolic processes that happen. So the way that your brain is receiving fuel. And I actually wanted to talk a bit about fuel for the brain. So we've heard about blood sugar and glucose. And glucose fuels the brain, but there is another form of fuel for the brain. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to hear about both of those and what your thoughts are, and what the efficiency is of each of them, and how they can be used therapeutically to treat brain injury and to improve cognition in general.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other big things is oxygen. Oxygen is really important. And I live at 9,000 feet up in the mountains, and that's a pretty good altitude. The air is very thin up here. So whenever people come to our Denver clinic, a lot of people, which is at 5,000 feet, but some people struggle with the altitude. Whenever you start seeing lower oxygen saturations in individuals, you start seeing that their fatigue level increases, that they fatigue faster, more rapidly. Right.
Yes.
And it's very hard to perform therapies. It's very hard to get them better if their brain doesn't have the fuel that they need.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So some of the things that we utilize is oxygen therapy. We utilize hyperbaric oxygen chambers. We monitor oxygen. We make sure that people are learning to breathe correctly, making sure that they're doing abdominal breathing, and that they're actually, getting good at getting the air into their lungs, and that they have the oxygen there to help get them the fuel that they need.
Sure.
Everybody listening to this just took a deep belly breath right there.
I did.
Yeah.
And absolutely. We were actually talking in the last podcast about how most people are not breathing correctly, and I mean, we were joking. We're like, maybe next book I write will be how to breathe, and I'm like, you think I'm joking? It's actually really important, and most people aren't breathing effectively.
How to overcome vertical apnea. Yes. Well, and Dr. Flowers, I'm in Calgary, Alberta. It's a sister city to Denver, Colorado, and we're at 3,500 feet, and it's a little short on air. You're shorter, but on oxygen. But it is a challenge. You're absolutely right. It's so much easier to recover at sea level.
However, I will say that, athletes train at higher altitudes because it increases their red blood cell count, which is what transports oxygen. So it's kind of like we don't have enough oxygen, so we need more of these cells so that we can carry what little we have and get it to the cells.
Well, I want Dr. Flowers' opinion on saturating the red blood cells. And of course, training at high altitude is one of the oldest tricks in the book. One of the newer tricks that I had to start working with after my second brain injury was saturating my plasma. So I had to saturate with EWAT, and it was my naturopath who actually introduced me to that and what a difference oxygen makes, let me tell you, because I was anemic after my adult onset pandas. The antibiotics had destroyed my gut and I became anemic. So
and
I did
anemic
not
means
have
that you have
less iron.
Iron, that's what it is.
Yes,
yeah.
going into my red blood cells to carry the oxygen.
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of anemias. There's actually vitamin deficiencies that can cause certain types of anemias. There's iron deficiency, of course, and then there's changes in what we call iron binding capacity, which is the ability for the oxygen and iron to bind. And there's all these different things that we look at to see exactly what type of anemia a patient has. But it's one of the most important things that we really look at. A lot of times people say, why do you want to look at somebody's blood? And that's like, well, there's a lot of really interesting things, even if it's just a brain injury. They have hormonal changes due to pituitary damage, which is very, very common. But one of the most important things is just simple anemias or changes in blood sugar.
Sure.
But if you don't have enough red blood cells, or you don't have enough iron, or you don't have that iron binding capacity, any of those, you're not getting enough oxygen. And the brain being, the ultimate control of everything in our body, when we get back to that point, it's the most sensitive. There are certain areas, especially the cerebellum and the basal ganglia, are very, very metabolically sensitive. So if you start seeing changes in that, you start seeing changes in people's, see them have tremors or see them have jerks and cramping and different things along those lines very early on whenever they start having small changes in oxygenation.
So let's talk about the cerebellum. Is the two lumps on the bottom, on the back bottom of the brain, and those are dedicated to coordinated muscle control and other coordinated movement and potentially coordinated thought. What about the basal ganglia?
The basal ganglia actually is in charge of initiating movement and keeping you from having movement, both kind of at the same time. It calms down unwanted movements, and basically we all have, resting tremors. We're all shaking to a certain extent. As our brain starts to degenerate or we start to have issues, you start to see the tremor actually slow down enough that it becomes visible.
Okay.
So we're if you hold your hand out, it's actually shaking. It should be, having a tremor fast enough that you can't see it.
Okay.
It.
Okay.
And so then as your brain starts to have changes, in a negative way, that tremor actually slows down. And then you start seeing that movement. Those can be issues between, the basal ganglia and the cerebellum. But then what we have is things like ballistic movements, Tourette's, different things along those lines.
Yes.
Those have to do with, those hyperkinetic disorders have to do with the basal ganglia not being able to stop the unwanted movement. Then the other side of the basal ganglion is what actually initiates movement. So that's whenever you say, hey, I want to reach out and grab this cup, or I want to do this or that. That's the actual areas of the brain that make that movement happen. Then the cerebellum in the back smooths it out. And these are all constantly communicating with each other to say, here's where I'm at, here's where I'm going, and I need to do this as smooth as possible.
Fascinating. Thank you for that explanation. I think the brain function itself is so often overlooked, and if it is considered, it's very misunderstood, even in this day and age, I find. And there's so much we can do, and your comment about the cerebellum and the basal ganglia being the most metabolically sensitive really catches my attention. And could we take just a few minutes and discuss how we feed a brain with the oxygen we've covered? And then let's get into the glucose and the ketones, because clearly fuel to feed this very important organ is going to affect our outputs and our capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that if any of you, people who have been around diabetics, especially juvenile diabetics, that have to take insulin, you definitely see those changes whenever they have major blood sugar dysregulation. Whenever it gets way too high or way too low, the brain starts to act very, very funny, and it does not like it. One of the other things is after a head injury, we see a spike in blood sugar within the brain.
Okay.
Which there's a lot of different theories and stuff on that. One of the things, and there's a lot of different treatments and trials that have happened for in the emergency room where they were taking insulin and putting it in a drip and doing insulin intravenously, but they weren't seeing a lot of changes in it. I work with a doctor here in Colorado who does intranasal insulin.
Oh, really?
And they do intranasal stem cells, intranasal insulin, and a lot of different really, really cool things that we've been able to help send patients over there and partner with them and do some different work. But they do amazing work, and it's really interesting to see a lot of these different approaches to help control glucose within the brain. Another big thing that people are looking at and trying to help regulate is calcium. And there's a lot of literature on regulating calcium both post-injury and in neurodegenerative diseases, which is very, very interesting.
So tell us a little bit. Tell us about that, please. One of the things.
Well, they're seeing major fluctuations and stuff, and basically a lack of regulation in calcium. And now they're saying, hey, they're putting people in different supplements and stuff to help regulate it. And they're seeing very significant changes.
So why would that be important?
I think it's one of those things all the way around with brain. Everything needs to be in a good regulation. It's like cholesterol just in our blood. People get excited when the cholesterol gets too high. It's more, you need to worry more about balance more so than is this high, is this low? It needs to be, with cholesterol, it needs to be at a ratio, but cholesterol helps to make hormones. Calcium helps regulate cells and cell activation. And it does all of these different things are combined to help how a cell activates. One of the biggest issues that we see is there's what's called the threshold or resting threshold of a cell.
Okay.
And whenever you activate a cell, it fires and action potentials. If you don't have certain metabolic processes, such as methylation issues, we can find out in genes and stuff like that, where you don't process methylated B vitamins and different things like that. But methylation processes are done throughout our entire body to help produce ATP and all kinds of different good things. So
let's talk about, and I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt when things get kind of complicated, because I want to make sure our audience understands all this stuff. So when we're talking about methylation pathways, let's go back and let's talk about what methylation pathways are and what methylation is.
Okay, methylation is a process in which it's like a chemical process in which methyl donors, these are kind of like, you remember back to chemistry where you had different particles, different molecules. These are different compounds that are interacting with each other to make new and other compounds. So they have energy cycles such as the Crib cycle, where we take.
And that's a cycle to create ATP, which is the brain and body's energy currency.
Energy. That's right.
Yes, exactly. So, these are different pathways that help that process along. And so every cell throughout our body needs B vitamins. This is one of the reasons that vegan diets are very dangerous, because if you don't know how to properly supplement, because B vitamins are very, very important for brain health.
Right.
So we can test people to see, if they don't have this process or not, whether or not they have this methyl genes, and they can process methylation. So, these are, sorry, I'm getting a little too in depth probably for everybody, but these are very important factors as into healing, as into just overall energy, health, and it's something that's oftentimes overlooked and can be a huge factor. One of the other things, kind of going back to where I said that the basal ganglion is one of the most metabolically sensitive areas of the brain.
Yes.
We've seen patients who have done amphetamine use,
Yes.
either pharmaceutically for long periods of time or, recreationally, and have seen movement disorders appear. I've treated, people with tardive dyskinesia, which is a movement disorder of the head and mouth, from long-term Ritalin use. And I've seen patients who've developed Tourette's type syndromes and stuff like that from just one or two uses of recreational drugs, which is, just proof that especially in certain individuals that are a little more vulnerable, these things can be very, very dangerous very, very quickly.
And what about feeding? What about these prescriptions for Ritalin that are so quickly handed out to children who have behavioral issues? What's the long-term consequence of that?
This real quick, how did those drugs affect the metabolic demand of the basal ganglia and the cerebellum? They both really want oxygen and glucose or another substrate or fuel to make energy. So what happens with these drugs that really interrupts that?
Yes.
These drugs help upregulate dopamine, very, very high levels. Dopamine drives the basal ganglion, so it drives movement. And there's different dopamine pathways within the basal ganglia. Certain pathways initiate physical movement. Other pathways initiate thoughts. Thought can be kind of perceived as a non-physical movement. It's a movement of thoughts throughout your mind. So what can happen is, this is kind of where you get into pandas. Whenever these areas are affected, you can develop a movement disorder, or you can develop a neuropsychiatric disorder where you have irrational thoughts, or what we would say irrational movements of the mind, where you have perseveration of thoughts, and they just keep going and going and going. You're like, why am I thinking about this, and why can't I get it off my mind?
Yes, I was there.
And then that kind of leads into the sleep issues, and that leads into a big issue of parasympathetics and sympathetics, where your parasympathetics are how we rest and relax, and our sympathetics is our fight or flight. So whenever a lot of times whenever you have changes in that. You see changes in stress hormones, such as cortisol, that starts to spike in the evening. You try to lay down for bed, and all of a sudden your mind starts racing. You start perseverating either over the things in the past or, what you have on your plate the next day.
Right.
And so your mind starts racing, and then all of a sudden you can't stop thinking about stuff. That releases more cortisol, and then you get all wound up, and then you're laying in bed and you can't sleep. And then most Americans turn on the TV and they sit up and they start watching TV, which then comes into the effect of blue light that are emitted from screens, which can cause a lot of issues and wind up in the brain. The area of the midbrain called the mesencephalon is very sensitive to light. It helps filter. It helps. Blue light helps wrap it up, and that causes more sympathetic drive, which is where you get that whole fight or flight response. So then that causes that cortisol release, and then all of a sudden you're all anxious and up and awake, and you can't calm down and go to bed. So that's one of the reasons that a lot of people have sleep issues.
If we're taking care of the blue light exposure, we're not watching TV, but we back it up, so that's not an issue. We're looking at the perseverating thoughts and the cortisol that elevates because of that. What can we do to troubleshoot that? You live in Colorado, so let me bring up cannabis and medicinal cannabis and the use of that. Yeah, what sort of things can we do? Because I know how important sleep is, and it's sort of a tricky thing to treat.
Well, when it comes to sleep, there's two major issues. There's the people who can't fall asleep, and there's the people who can't stay asleep.
Okay.
And that's the two big deciding factors on really what's going on.
And they could be both, right?
And it can be both. I mean, you can have people that just can't fall asleep and then they nod off and then they wake back up. One of the biggest issues on falling asleep is, again, cortisol release and having high cortisol in the evenings. The reason that's important is because when your cortisol's high, you don't produce melatonin. Melatonin is what puts us to sleep. It's what allows us to go to sleep. So that's why a lot of people supplement with melatonin. Mm-hmm. And then what keeps us asleep is a neuroreceptor called GABA. And GABA allows us to stay asleep. So then if a patient has significant enough GABA, they have enough GABA, the only other issue that they have from staying asleep, if they're having major blood sugar fluctuation and they don't have enough blood sugar, they'll wake up hungry and they need to eat something. So people who have blood sugar issues, they need to eat fats before they go to bed because it takes longer to break down fats, and that will give them significant enough stability in their blood sugar throughout the night that they should get a full night's sleep. People who don't have enough GABA, there's GABA supplements, there's GABAergic drugs, there's a lot of different options along that route. Going back to the CBD and cannabis, one of the really interesting things that they're finding now in the research is THC, which is kind of always been the bad side to marijuana and the downside. The side that everybody was all upset about because that's what causes the high effect and causes you to possibly have hallucinations and different stuff like that. But it's always kind of been the bad side to
the bad kid on the block
view of it.
Yeah,
exactly.
This is the bully.
So, one of the things that we're finding now is that the degraded THC, when THC molecules are starting to degrade and fall apart, they make other molecules that actually keep people asleep. So the joke now is, well, all people need is old weed, and smoke some old weed and you'll fall asleep in no time. Especially out here in Colorado. So it's very interesting to see, what the research is showing on that. Also, I think that in certain people, there is a relaxing effect that helps bring down the anxiety.
Sure.
Some people, however, get more anxiety from it. So one of the things that we're working with a couple different lab companies is developing genetic testing so that we can be able to say, you're not a good candidate for utilizing medical marijuana, or you are a good candidate, depending on your genes.
Right.
To be able to say, you can metabolically utilize this. One of the things is PANS and PANDAS. I had an adult PANS patient that was telling me every time she utilized certain strains of marijuana, she would go crazy. And she's like, I can't explain it. She's like, every time I do it, and she's like, and it's only, more indica dominant plants, sativa dominant plants. And she was like, I lose it. And she's like, I don't make sense. People around me like, you don't make sense. And she's like, I go crazy. It was very interesting to see this patient and to start looking into it. And that's kind of one of the things where we actually correlate Cunningham panels, which is how you test for PANS and PANDAS. And we take that panel and we look at it and compare it to, what the patients are saying as far as their recreational drug use or other things. And then that gives us a pretty good eye opener to how the basal ganglia is actually being affected by these things.
Yeah, no kidding. That's terrific. Thank you for doing that. I think this is really an issue that's going to become more and more recognized, and this work is going to be very useful. In fact, I've already got some ideas to connect you with a few people I know about doing some PANDAS research. Dr. Flowers, could we jump back to feeding the brain the glucose, blood sugar drop, and the need for fats before bed? What if, and I'm going to use a real life example myself, someone who's on a not necessarily ketogenic diet, but definitely has a high fat diet or high fat supper. I have an issue and I can't quite figure it out, that I will wake, and Dr. Karazian talks about that 3 o'clock in the morning wake up call. And that's definitely a blood sugar drop. And so I've used his work to assess where my brain is in need of some assistance. But what confounds me is that I will have this high fat diet, and I'll do animal fats, saturated fats. I'll do the coconut oil, medium chain triglyceride, saturated fats. I'll do olive oil. Nothing really seems to satiate me through the night if I have what I call an occipital buzz or a C-spine buzz, my cervical spine, just somewhere up there. And some nights it's so intense that I feel like I just want to put my hand through my mouth into the back of my throat and hang on to whatever is vibrating. And that just seems to rev up my need for food, even though I'm not hungry.
A lot of what that is most likely, granted, I haven't ever examined you or anything.
Yes.
So I'm talking a little bit out of hand, but
of course.
With the adult onset PANS, we look at the brain and we look at caloric intake and caloric usage. The brain utilizes the majority of our caloric intake. A lot of people think, I'm going to go work out, so I need to eat this big meal so that my muscles can grow. Well,
right.
There's a little bit of truth to that. But the fact of the matter is only about 20% maybe 25% of our caloric intake is actually going to the utilization of our muscles. The other 75 to 80% is fueling the brain. The brain uses a huge amount of that energy to decide what it's doing, to make the decision, I'm going to reach out and do this. I'm going to coordinate this movement.
Okay.
I'm going to lift these weights. It takes a lot of energy to think that through. Well, whenever you have PANS or PANDAS, you have those areas of your mind, of your basal ganglia, just constantly racing. They're constantly going. And that's where the buzzing and stuff like that is more than likely almost like spasm type movements of your suboccipital musculature, or it could be.
Suboccipital musculature.
That's a big statement.
Let's break that down.
Yeah, so the muscles of the upper neck, where where you would basically your neck and your head connect, the muscles that hold that together and kind of move things around wherever you look left and right, turn your head left and right. Those muscles can be having basically small movement disorders where they're spontaneously contracting and relaxing, causing almost a twitching or a tremor type sensation.
Wow.
And then, so your brain is causing that to happen. It's that right there is utilizing a whole lot of energy that you don't.
Sure.
Or you look at people with restless leg syndrome, and they fall asleep and their legs are going to town and shaking and twitching and stuff like that. That takes a lot of energy because the brain is constantly making that happen, and that's not a good thing. The more you calm it down, the more that you see these patients and you start seeing changes in tremor. Or even changes in eye movement. It's one of the big things that we look at. If they're not doing it efficiently, it takes a whole lot more energy than it should. So if we see these movements and we can't control them, we're wasting a lot of energy throughout the day that we don't necessarily need to. Or in some certain cases, throughout the night, whenever a patient's sleeping, they're actually expelling a lot of energy that's unnecessary, because certain areas aren't calming down enough to keep us from moving.
Well, that's really fascinating, because that may very well explain the fact that sometimes in the middle of the night, I will wake up and my neck is so sweaty, it has soaked my pillow.
Mm-hmm.
Another big thing that we see is people with jaw movements, with grinding of their teeth.
Okay.
Those are movement disorders.
Okay.
Most people don't think of these things as brain issues, but they're really a brain issue. It's just like, they grip their teeth when they're asleep. We need to put them in a mouth guard. And say, okay, that's a good prevention for protecting their teeth, but they're still having a movement disorder, and they're going to wake up and their jaw's going to be sore, and then they'll be like, why is my jaw sore? Or it's the same type of concept. Possibly with your neck. And again, I am speaking out of hand because.
Oh, of course.
There's a lot of different things that it could be. Looking at you, this is just, a nice, what's popping into my head at the moment right now.
Of course.
As far as that could be affecting it.
No, there's never a substitute for an in-person, thorough functional neurology examination. And I have to say, that was one of the convincing factors I had when I was at our neurology center here in Calgary, and had, maybe a 15, 20-minute exam. And then I had a functional neurology exam for 3 hours. And I thought, oh my gosh. Okay, huge difference. The assessment, even as a lay person, the assessment was so much more thorough.
Mm-hmm. And this is something I wanted to talk about with the Revive centers. When I came in there, the assessment was it was extremely in depth. An entire day was spent just learning about my brain function and looking at eye movements, vestibular input, reaction times, all sorts of different factors. And I really appreciate how you guys take in so much about each patient's specific brain to determine how you might approach treating each person individually.
That's one of the things we're the most passionate about. It's really difficult. It's not very good for the patient to just jump to conclusions and to say, it's probably this because you've already been labeled with this.
Right.
We don't really, when we look at other people's labels, it's like, okay, great, I'll spend a little more time looking in this direction or, whatever. But we don't like to take other people's words for it. And not to say that, there's not other good doctors out there. There's plenty of other good doctors. I just don't know if they saw a good doctor or if they saw somebody who, has absolutely no clue what they're doing or, especially when it comes to neurological stuff. So,
but even if they were to see a good doctor, 4 eyes are typically better than 2. And then you take in personal experience, like, for example, yourself with a pediatric focus, you sustained a TBI and then all of a sudden had a new appreciation, passion, and desire to pursue yet even more.
You look at like PANS and PANDAS. A lot of children are misdiagnosed with autism because most family practitioners don't know enough about the disorders and the different disorders that are out there. And it's nothing against them. It's just outside their wheelhouse. They've never studied that. And so with us, that's one of the big reasons that we don't take the other person's word for it. We're not like, well, they diagnosed them with this. We don't worry as much about the labels as we do about the brain function.
Yes.
So we sit down and then we start breaking everything down. A lot of times, you go to a specialist and they look, a heart specialist, and they look at the heart, a cardiologist, and they just want to look at the heart. And they don't really care a whole lot about your hormones. They don't really care a whole lot about what your brain is doing. And a lot of cardiologists at this day and time still don't acknowledge that there's a lot of input between the heart and the brain. They consider it to be a very standalone system. Well, with us, we look at everything because everything ultimately affects the brain. We're going to check out your heart. We're not going to go, super crazy in depth. We don't do cardiac stress tests and stuff like that. But, if an EKG is necessary, we might do one. We do always listen to people's hearts and lungs and their abdomen because all of those things are important. If they have a lung issue and it's overlooked, well, that changes their oxygenation. If they have a heart issue and that's overlooked, well, if they have a valve issue, they can have a stroke. They're at higher risk. If they're not, if they have a change in rate or rhythm or stroke volume, then that can change the oxygenation to the brain or the periphery. So all of these things are very, very important to us. When we do a neurological exam, and this is a big thing for functional neurology that all of us kind of hang our hat on, is we look at subclinical findings.
Yes, very good.
A lot of people will say,
what do you mean by that?
The difference between, we'll use pupils, for example. Whenever we look at people's pupils and we see a difference from side to side, well, the medical world views that it has to be a full millimeter difference from the right pupil to the left pupil.
So when you're saying that, you're saying the pupil size, like how much it's dilated?
Exactly. The
black dot middle of the eye, how much it's dilated.
Yes, that's the example that I'm utilizing right now. The size of the black dot, is considered, the pupillary dilation. So If we were to say that that is 3 millimeters on the right side and it's 4 millimeters on the left side, well, then we would have a difference of 1 millimeter, and the medical world considers that clinically significant.
Okay.
In my world, what we would do is we would look at it and we might see a 0.5 millimeter difference. Well, a 0.5 millimeter isn't considered clinically significant, but it may be significant for that patient.
Yes.
So we note that. And then we do that for all of our findings. You may have a little more sensation on the right side of your face. You may have a little less on your left. We note that because that tells us more about the brainstem and how you're feeding in sensation on that cranial nerve. So what we're doing is we're looking at subtleties as well as the big stuff. But we take note of all of these different things. And then we go down and we sit down with our group of practitioners, and we all sit in the room together and we say, hey, this is what we saw. What does that mean about this area of the brain? What does this mean about, gut function? What does it mean about this or that? Did they have, are they having contractions in, their musculature of their leg because they had, an injury in that area, or is it because of a neurological issue? And we break it all down, and then we're able to say these areas of the brain aren't functioning as well as they should. Not these areas have issues, these areas have damage. They're just not functioning as well as what we would consider normal, or as well as the other side. So yeah, that's kind of how we add all of it up. And then we look at it and we say, okay, well, this is the areas of the brain that we need to start treating, or that we need to come up with a therapeutic approach to affect.
And so when you say we need to come up with a therapeutic approach, how many practitioners are in that collaborative we? Because going back to the 2 eyes is better, or 4 eyes is better than 2, you've got a number of people with a number of specialties sitting around your table.
Yeah, we have 4 different practitioners that are always in the office. Then we have some very, very highly regarded neurologists, neuropathologists, interventional neurologists on our team as well. So whenever we get things that haven't been seen before, then we start calling in everybody else and saying, hey, have you ever seen this before? And then, we start getting that collaborative approach and saying, how can we affect this? And then, like I said, we have other clinics that we work with, such as the ones that are doing stem cells, which is, a very, very interesting world that we're looking into right now, especially with strokes and traumatic brain injuries, as to how can we help get some regeneration of some of these neurocells, brain cells, in these damaged patients.
Definitely.
And the potential there is just amazing. And that kind of goes back to, we make a full circle here. We skipped over the last thing that the brain really needs for fuel, and that is activation. And that's,
yes.
One of the big things that we all pride ourselves on in the functional neurology world is coming up with different therapies to help activate different regions of the brain and different networks of the brain. And that's where, we really succeed well in the therapeutic realm, is from seeing where the changes need to be, coming up with therapies that directly activate those areas of the brain, and then measuring to make sure that they're getting the change from the therapy that we want to see, and then doing it over and over and over again until we get the plastic change that we want. Neuroplasticity is pretty much the ultimate goal, getting the brain to change itself so that, you can do the things that you need to do.
Oh, exactly.
While I was at Revive, that was one of the most beautiful aspects of it, was seeing where your workspaces were, because there's one office in the very center where everybody it's just a big room where everybody works together and collaborates together, and they have the whiteboard and they write up ideas, and there is communication between each person on the team. And I very much appreciate that. It also takes, what we were talking about earlier with not taking a doctor's word for it, but actually seeing for ourselves and making sure that we're on the same page. It kind of plays into the theme that we have been talking about a lot recently, which is taking the arrogance out of medicine and displacing that with curiosity.
It's a lot to digest and it's a lot to understand, but being able to kind of open your mind to different opportunities and start, figuring these things out, and having a caretaker or family member, somebody that can help direct you through these things, somebody that you can trust, that has you in their best interest, and be able to sit down with them, especially because, like we said earlier, it's very, very tough to navigate these things with a fresh brain injury, and being able to ask the right questions.
You need your brain. You need your brain to organize, and the paradox of it is just when you need your brain, it doesn't work.
It's funny. I used to spend a very long time explaining to patients what exactly was going on with their brains, and really drawing it out in great depth on the first day. And then I realized they weren't grasping any of it, and I just stopped doing it now. And now what we do is we educate our patients throughout the time period that they're in the office.
Yes.
And we kind of do it more of a drip than hitting them with a fire hose the first day. And it's one of those things like, oh, this area is damaged, it's not working so good, and here's what we're going to do. And the patient's glazed over 2 minutes in, and then I continue to talk for an hour, which is very long-winded. But what I found is you get a lot more understanding, and the more understanding that a patient has, the better success they have, because they know why they're doing things. It's one of the great things about Kevin, getting to work with him, is his desire to learn more and more about this and to find things to help them out more and more along the way. And those are the patients that get the most success, because we can get them so far when they're in the clinic. And then it's up to them to continue their journey when they get home. And this isn't a one-stop shop. This isn't a quick fix for anyone. It took me, I was very, very blessed, but I had 8 weeks of a nonstop migraine after my brain injury. Just figuring out how to fix people and help them as fast as possible. And getting them over that hump in 2 weeks is a big part of what we do, but then it's up to them from there, whether they go back home and they crawl in a corner and give up, or whether they continue their journey and they continue to strive and go forward.
Why is it that 2 weeks is how long it takes to really drive significant changes?
I've been doing this for 7 years now, and I've been in a lot of different clinics and a lot of different atmospheres. And we adapted 2 weeks because at one point early on, I was doing 3 days a week for 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in there, kind of a general treatment plan that you see at a lot of other physicians' offices. And what I found was patients weren't doing anything in between. They rely on you to be the reason that they're getting gains. And so that was a struggle. Then we got into 1 week immersive plans, and we just crammed, it's hitting them with a fire hose for 1 week. And we got very significant results. It was amazing. But patients were just annihilated by the end of the week. And so then we went to this 2 week plan. And we've kind of staggered it and structured it a little differently, and we've taken we have a lot of different tools and stuff that we utilize now, and therapeutic approaches that we utilize now, so the patients don't get as fatigued. But it's still, I mean, it's a direct workout of the areas of the brain that haven't been worked out so well in a while,
Right.
that have kind of been overlooked and neglected. So there's a very high fatigue rate. So what we found is 2 weeks really helps us get the outcomes that we want. Part of that is we're doing 2.5 to 3.5 hours of neurological therapy in one day for 10 days over 2 weeks. We're not open on the weekends. And that kind of gives the patient a little bit of rest and recovery time over the first week. And that helps really drive that neuroplastic change that we're looking for. And the more you do something, the more your brain fires and likes it. And some of the modalities that we utilize, talking about some of the miracles that we get to see, is we've seen a lot of people who come in wheelchairs up and walking by the time they're out the door.
Exactly. Yes.
They're walking out the door. It's just, it's very, very rewarding. It gives you a sense of meaning in what you do.
And it gives hope. The patient then has hope. I mean, life has changed so radically, and you come in, you get all this love, care, attention, and treatment over 2 weeks, and it really, I think, changes the mindset of the person. And then for them to see, feel, and experience those positive results, well, hallelujah.
It's amazing to see, what these patients. It's truly about quality of life for them, not only them, but for their family, their caretakers, and for everyone.
Yes.
And that's what, is actually part of our, our mission statement for our company, for Revive, is to increase the quality of life, to help people live life better and love life more, to give them quality of life.
And when you help one life, that life can help many others. So really, it's just, that's the pebble in the pond, because there's that ripple effect. It's not just that patient and that caregiver. It's that whole community that patient is a part of. And so the patient can move back into being a person and back into life. So we're going to let you get back to those beautiful people who need you so much. And I want to, before we let you go, thank all of your team at Revive, your nurses, nurse practitioners, speech therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, your chiropractors and medical doctors. I mean, it's wonderful to see that, so many brains are coming together to take care of one case and then many of those. And so if people are more interested in gaining more information, they can go online very easily to revivecenters.com. And I'm just going to make a little note here, because you American folks spell centers differently than the rest of us. So it's Revive Centers with an ERS.com. And Dr. Joshua Flowers, thank you very much for your time, your insight, your expertise, and sharing that with us and our audience.
Thank you so much, man. And really, we didn't talk too much about it, but we need to go dirt biking at some point. Absolutely.
I'm in.
I know you are.
You need to come out here. You need to come out here to Colorado.
I'll be there.
I'll be there
in just a couple weeks. We'll figure it out. I think we'll make it happen soon.
So I'm thinking.
Sounds great.
You two can go dirt biking, and I might just have to make my way down to our sister city and meet this beautiful woman in your life named Ashley, and thank her for sharing you with us. So our thanks to you and Ashley.
She keeps me on track and keeps me guided. So definitely a good thing for me. But yeah, I definitely look forward to seeing you guys. And again, one of the things I want to throw out there real quick is, talking about dirt biking. One of the biggest things that giving patients hope and having them realize that you have an injury doesn't mean that you have to live your life in bubble wrap. You can get back out there and you can live life again.
Amen.
And, you may, even if you're an amputee, there's ways around getting out there and being able to live your life and making the accommodations needed. But definitely not a reason to crawl up in a hole and give up.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. On that fine note, we bid you adieu.
Bid you adieu, and send my love to everybody over at Revive.
Yeah.
I will see them in a few weeks, and I can't wait.
We look forward to it.
Yeah.
Fabulous work.
Thank you, guys.
Right.
Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye-bye, Dr. Flowers. And that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 22 of Adventures in Brain Injury podcast. Our adventure with Dr. Joshua Flowers from Revive Treatment Centers of America. Kevin, another really fabulous interview with a passionate, generous, kind, knowledgeable soul.
That was fantastic. I really like that guy.
Yeah.
We're gonna be hanging out quite a bit. I'm very excited for the future.
You're gonna be dirt biking.
Dirt biking, yeah.
Always good to have
to
have a dirt bike doctor on your dirt bike course.
Yeah, especially one who's versed in emergency care.
And neurorehabilitation.
It's all in the same package. I love it.
Good for you. You guys will have a great time. Yes, wonderful. I'm not inspired to get on a bike, just so you know.
All right.
Back on a horse. I would be happy.
Back on a horse. That would be beautiful. Yeah, very majestic.
Yes. So I'll do that. You guys make noise, and I'll be peaceful on the back of a horse.
All right. So if you guys enjoyed this episode, you can find this and more episodes like it on Google Play, iTunes, on Stitcher, or anywhere else where podcasts are found. What else would we like to say, Michelle?
Well, if you would be so kind as to toss a dollar in the bucket, and in Canada we call it a loonie, or $2, which we call a toonie. We'd appreciate any support. Helps to facilitate and pay for it, the web page, the hosting, the editing, all of those hard costs that add up a little bit over time.
Indeed. Super appreciative. So check yourself. Is it worth $1 or $2 per episode? Hopefully we're providing that for you guys. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you soon.
Bye for now.
Someone take